Good afternoon, or good day, as the case may be. What I'd like to do is do a variety of little slides about what is commonly referred to as collection development policy. This is a written document that describes the areas in which a library collects and various processes that the library collects. In other words, how does the library handle different types of documents? I will discuss these a little further as the slides progress, but it is a good chapter in the book and has a lot more detail probably than what I will be presenting, but I'm going to present it primarily along the concept of the topic, but at the same time, I may mention some of the things that I have noticed in writing policies myself. Well, first of all, you need to realize that I call it a collection development policy. It is a common name as a collection development policy. If you look online for policies, you're going to find more of them under a collection development policy. It can be called a collection management policy. It could be called a selection policy. It might even be called an acquisition policy. But collection development policy is the term that I choose to use, the term that I prefer to use. But it might not always be the term that you find it under. Regardless, it is the same document, no matter what you call it. And because this is a collection development type course, I'm going to call it what I've always called it, which is a collection development policy. What is a collection development policy? Well, first of all, it is a written document, and it does a variety of things. The book has a selection. I'll mention those as well. But what I should tell you is it is primarily a written document that states the purpose of the collection. It is done for two levels. One level being a new employee, someone in the system, to know what it is that the library tends to collect. In other words, like it can be used as a training document for new employees. It is going to list these things out in a written fashion. The other aspect of it is it's available for non-librarians, people in the community, to be able to see what it is that the library is doing. Now, part of the reason that this is done at this point is because it's right after the user studies, and the user study can be used to develop a collection development policy. So it's a written document stating the purpose of the collection. It should include the missions, values, and vision of the library, something that the library should have in any case. But it should be listed here in this document as well. You should give a statement of purpose. Why is this document being written? You should take general selection areas and categorize them. Does the library collect heavily in print? Does it collect DVDs, Blu-rays, audio? What are the areas in which it collects, and to what extent may it collect? It may collect heavily in fiction. It may collect heavily in nonfiction. Is there something specific that should be stated? This is primarily what we're talking right now is we're talking public library. In other words, it's more of a generic. The library is going to collect only Blu-rays. I know of one library that only collected DVDs, even though Blu-rays were available. It still collected only DVDs because it wanted to be able to collect for everyone and not just those individuals that had Blu-ray machines. So these are the sort of things that would be covered, for example, in a general selection area of a document. Now, if you had sub-collections in a library, like archives, you might list those as well, but you would be more explicit in what that area encompasses. An archive collection might be very specific and might say, the library collects this area, but not this area. or or it's only primarily aiming for this type of document. So sub-collections can be a little more explicit. Then, of course, it covers the methods of handling materials. If there's anything specific beyond, you might just have a paragraph that talks about it generically, but on the other hand, you might have something more specific about it. Specifically, one of the areas to cover is gifts and donations. A library should, in general, have a very good gift listing, which says that we will collect only the areas in which we collected for the library. We'll only accept gifts in that area, or we will accept gifts, all gifts, but we do not. If you give us a gift of books, we might not say it's going to go into the library. It might go into, say, a book sale. A lot of times they'll say, you give us a gift, it could very well go to the Friends of the Library, but at the same time, in a public library, or, there are some specifics about gifts. Do not collect. We do not accept encyclopedias. We do not accept VHS tapes in this world of DVDs and Blu-rays. The other aspect is donations. The library might always take money, but will it take money and buy books in a particular genre? Sometimes when people give money as a donation, they say, especially with donations from obituaries, they might say the person would like books on this particular type of topic. And a lot of times it's broad enough that the library can buy books that fit into the collection areas that the library normally does, and then they just merely assign a donation for that book. That would be an example. But you should have it spelled out in a collection development policy. How do you handle gifts? How do you handle donations? Now, a couple other things that should be listed in such a document are any ways a patron can complain or a challenge process. How does the library handle a challenge against materials on or anything in the library? Many cases, what I'd recommend, and it's a very good process, is that you only accept a challenge process if it is written. For example, a person might complain verbally, in an oral fashion, with, not written down, but just merely a vocal complaint. You can listen to those complaints, but to process the complaint, you might have to say it's got to be in writing. You might either have it how it should be written out on a piece of paper, or you might even have a form that they have to fill out. But that should be part of the collection development policy. Another aspect in the policy is you should mention how the library handles weeding or deselection. And then, of course, now the other aspect too is if a patron makes a request for adding a title, how do you handle adding a title? A good example in this is many libraries will say that we will only add titles on patron requests if they match the genre of what the library collects normally. In other words, if a patron requests a book that is not part of the normal selection process that you would have bought otherwise, you may say that you will accept those or deny those, depending. To give you an example, in this specific case of adding titles upon a patron request, many libraries would say we accept titles on patron requests based on if it's fitting our category, unless that specific title is asked by X number of patrons. You might say if 2 patrons or 3 patrons or 4 patrons ask for the same title, even if it's not one that you would normally buy, you buy it anyway. Now, some libraries got caught in this because they will have a statement that says, if X number of patrons request a title, we will buy it. Well, a number of years ago, I myself was on the intellectual freedom committees that was from a library association, a local, statewide library association, and I served on intellectual freedom for a while. At that time, you may not realize this at the time, but at the time there was a book published by Madonna called Sex, which was a book of images, photographs. Libraries had a policy that said if X number of patrons asked for a book, they would add it. Well, it happened in a lot of libraries that a lot of people asked for the book, and so the library purchased it. Now, some libraries did different things. The book was very poorly bound, so some libraries did different methodologies of rebinding it so that it would be accessible for people to use. Some libraries put it on the shelf, and some libraries kept it behind the circulation desk that people could request. They could ask for the book, and it would be given to them upon request. Then you also have the issues of, how do you handle minors, for example, in public libraries. We can discuss this in greater detail, but that is an issue to consider. And so the item could be requested. Well, almost all of these libraries received challenges for the book, and so significantly that the Intellectual Freedom Committee that I was on got involved. And of course, there's the American Library Association also has committees on intellectual freedom, and they were involved too. So this was a specific case where there's quite a few challenges on a item that was primarily added to libraries based upon patron requests. So, patrons requested it, it was added to the collection, and then other people challenged it. Interesting time, shall we say, for me to be on the Intellectual Freedom Committee at that time. Now, let's talk about sections of a policy. Now, this is primarily, if you will, from the group, and this is kind of a repeat of the previous slide. That is, that you have to have a section of a policy should have a purpose and mission, topics and formats, selection criteria. How is the collection assessed and evaluated? How do you handle complaints, and how do you handle guests, and how do you handle weeding? Now, strictly speaking, I would put complaints at the very end of the document. After you handle, the purpose, mission, topics and formats, selection, assessments, gifts, donations, weeding, then I would add complaints, or I would add complaints near the weeding section, but basically at the very bottom of the document. The reason I would put it at the bottom of the document is because you want people to be able to find complaints if necessary, but you don't want to make it up front in the document. Put it towards the rear of the document. A little more psychological. Now, a very good example of some libraries, and it's mentioned in the book, they refer to them as mini policies in the book. But what it amounts to is a policy for a specific area, specific collection. You will find mini policies not necessarily used in public libraries or school libraries, particularly public libraries, which may have a separate policy, say, for example, archives. But frequently you will find in public libraries one single policy. It may be the children's librarian might have a little bit more specific policy, but it might not be published as much as the primary policy. Whereas in academia, you tend to find a lot of mini policies. Now, like I said, it could be used in public libraries, but academia tends to use it. And a good example is Michigan State University has policies for each collection area. They utilized, and this was common, what's called the RLG, Research Libraries Group. Research Libraries Group, RLG, existed from the mid-70s to about 2006 when it merged with OCLC. But during that time, they created a process of categorizing to what level these sub-collections, or these mini policies, if you will, collected. And so if you went to Michigan State University, you will find under each web page for each area, such as chemistry I was involved in, because I wrote one there for chemistry, but you will find them for English, any field of study will have, many of them have these collections. And they use a RLG statement where what it does is it says, if you will, it says you're going to collect this level at level 1B, 2C. The number represents you collect everything there is to be collected in that field, or you only collect things that can be used for research, or you only collect things that can be used for education. You can keep everything there is in this one area, but you might weed a little bit more in this other area. So the letters and numbers represent the level of collection area. If you take a look at the RLG, the Research Libraries Group, you can find what these codes stand for. And then if you look at Michigan State University and take a look at their codes, you'll know to what extent certain areas are collected. I will use chemistry because I was involved in writing chemistry. So in other words, I might say that we collect everything in organic chemistry, collect everything in physical chemistry, but we only collect chemical education to a lesser level. Take a look at different academic institutions if you're interested in academia to see how the sub-collections work. And Michigan State University is a good place for that. Now, examples of policies. If you look at Denver Public Library's policy, it's got a good section on how it handles gifts and how it handles challenges. But if you look at the Kalamazoo Public Library, their website, these things you can easily Google. It has a good mission, values, and vision statements in there. If you take a look at the Cincinnati and Hamilton County Library, they have a section that is very good on challenges. If you ever watched the movie The Public with Emilio Estevez, it's based on the Cincinnati Library. So you might find it of interest if you haven't seen it to watch it. Now, there is going to be an assignment that's involved in writing a collection development policy, and you will find greater details on the Canvas page. But in short, you should review example policies. There's a limit, how many example policies you should view. Then you need to write a policy for a library. Now, this is an individual assignment, so everybody's going to write a policy. Now, the library you write the policy for does not have to exist in reality. It can be an imaginary library. As a matter of fact, it's better if it's an imaginary library. The reason is you're not going to find a policy. If you used a real library, you're probably going to find a policy. And in an imaginary library, you're not going to find a policy. What you can do is you can reference sections of policies from the examples. In other words, you might take the gift section from a library that you find as having a very good gift section, you can rewrite it in your own language, but you reference that section of the policy that's got a very good section. And then after you write that section, then you reference the policy from which you got the information. If you choose a mission value statements, you can take those, say, directly from a library, and then reference the mission statements you've got. Some of the sections you will definitely want to write yourself in your own language, but you reference where you got the information from. Then at the end of the paper or the policy, then list the references, which include all the documents, all the policies that you utilized in the document, or to get other information from, and any sources you may have used, any articles, any writings that you may have used to give yourself some statement. So the policy is going to be one that you write yourself, but you can get information from other policies for that section. And if you can paraphrase it in your own language. In some cases, you may want to take it directly, like say a mission statement. You might want to take directly from some library that you feel has a very good mission statement. But use as much language of your own as you wish, or as possible. Again, see the Canvas assignment page for the assignment's details. Now, as far as questions go, you can post any question on the virtual office or send me an email. There's going to be a discussion page on collection development as well, where people might reference for other students policies that you found that have a very good section or part that you might find of interest that other people could utilize as well. Or that you found very interesting. If there are any questions, please feel free to contact me. Thank you.